challenge to try to make it manageable.
You know, my grandfather once told me, he used to say, there's no accounting for taste.
Yeah. Right.
But the standards are kind of a funny thing. I was lucky enough to be on the American National Standards Institute Committee for district school standards back in the early 80s.
That is sexy.
Yeah. It wasn't me. It was the X3T9.2 committee that developed the SCSI standard, which
That's actually
it was a process, because when you develop a standard, it's a double-edged blade. First of all, the good side is it assures continuity and everything works together and all that. But if you tie up things too tightly, then you put a damper on innovation, right? So when you're developing a standard, you always have to leave room for innovation, for things that you couldn't have thought of. And I think it's the same thing with architectural standards. If the standards are too tight, then I probably couldn't have built the house that we built.
Yeah,
It's a very
right.
modern house.
I would say that, you know, if you're really committed to excellence in design, most of the homes that are designed are builder designs. So if you required plans submitted into our city to be architecturally sealed, you would have somebody who has been trained, not an engineer signing off on the plans. You would have an actual architect who has trained and gone to school to be that, reviewing their own designs and submitting those things. So I think that could be a first step without censorship. Just that in itself could make a difference.
Well, the way that most of our advisory boards are designed and set up in the city, they really are advisory boards. So if we had an architectural review board, they function as an advisory board. So therefore, I think that the idea has some merit. And it would not be that they could restrict what is built in the city. They could make recommendations to the commission, as we do with many other aspects of building and planning in the city already. So I don't see it as a threat. I think it's a good idea. And I think the devil's in the details. How is it set up, and what are the processes, and how does it work? So I know that one thing that bothers the building industry terribly in our city is that it seems that it takes a very long time to get decisions made and things to move through the process. And I've heard that complaint over and over, and I'm sympathetic to it because it's business, and it's how people need to function and stay alive. And so I'm not saying it's important to just speed everything through, but I think it is important to set up something, if we do this, in such a way that it makes it possible for the building industry to function in an efficient way. Maybe more efficiently than it does now.
I just wanted to comment, a number of years ago, Council Philippe sponsored a trip down, and we worked with the city. We took the city planner with us and went down to Carl Gables. We spent a couple of days down there looking at how their review board worked, and it wasn't a matter of restricting things, really. It was a matter of, it wasn't style. It was good architecture. It was what about context? What do you do to your neighbor? What about air rights, and how does light come in? How do all of those things figure in? I think of that review committee being someone that would oversee all of those aspects, but not dictate style and other things like that. So that, in my experience, I think that would be how it works best.
You know, there's an example of this, something that I've been going through for the last number of weeks. This thing called the National Young Composers Challenge. We have a panel of judges that judge scores that come in from young composers 13 to 18 years old around the country. We usually have maybe 100 or so scores to look through. And when we first started this, I remember one of the judges saying, you know, this piece is in the style of Mozart, that's already been done, we should consider that. But I said, let's not be style critics. Right? I mean, good architecture is good architecture, right? Just good music is good music. And you can't put a definition on what makes it good, but people that are experts can recognize it. So I agree with you.
You know that, if I may, that the design review committee doesn't review design per se without having design guidelines. So the city would have to adopt a design district, for example, and within each district would have to determine with the involvement of the people and commercial interests, et cetera, what are the criteria that you want to maintain, and then add to it the cultural and aesthetic aspects that make Winter Park unique, and then assign the architectural control committee to help in the adjudication of whether a facility fulfills air rights, fulfills setbacks, fulfills enough traffic lanes to accommodate the density of blah, 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 that kind of thing. So you can't have a design review committee without having design guidelines set up first. So when we're talking about maybe an advisory group which has that function, one of the first functions would be to assist in developing the design guidelines for design districts.
So I would add one thing to that too, and that is that often in Winter Park we hear that we need to protect certain things, but keep in mind too, there wasn't an architectural review committee that made Winter Park Winter Park. There's also not a tree board that imposed fines if people took down trees, and yet we have a tree canopy. I think left to their own devices, most people want good things. You will have abuses of the system. There's no writing that out of any code. There's going to be abuses of the system, and we have them. But at the same time, when you look around at Winter Park, again, not every building in Winter Park is beautiful. And so we're getting some great stuff. I'm looking at who I believe in a bunch of years, people will look back and say this is a Phil Keene house. He is doing amazing work throughout the region, around the country. And yet I couldn't get Phil appointed to the architectural or historic preservation board. People were fighting me on that. He doesn't know architecture. Phil Keene. Okay. So you want to talk about politics in this town and how things somehow get down a path. If you can have Phil Keene look at your project, it's an honor. It's amazing. So you have to take, as I think Phil was talking about, taking the politics out of it. Phil was going to mention it. And I think people do look for help, but at the same time, it's a very difficult challenge. So if we can keep politics, if we can keep the preferences out of it, and go to pure design and pure architecture and pure style, I think there's some merit to it, but it's a challenge.
I think it's an excellent point. I love the point that good music is good music, but if I ask some of my students to get their playlist and start playing some of the rap they love, I'm not sure how many people in here would think that's good music. And for them, that's brilliant music, that's wonderful music. We had a question about
Yes.
or comment.
I'm actually an architect here in Winter Park, so I find this conversation pretty interesting. And I agree a lot with what you said, Pete, with how the younger generation, kind of how everyone's moving to the center of the city, right? But at the same time, we kind of feel like the trends are going that way, and we all kind of, as architects, agree with that. However, it does seem like there is some disagreement with that. Obviously, people don't like libraries, some people do like it. Some people are against the density, some people kind of feel like it's inevitable. So if you kind of are going to reach some type of consensus with both kind of being sensitive to the actual community and understanding that development is inevitable, how do we, I guess, suppose, just balance each side?
I think he's looking at you.
Well, I'm certainly not, I don't know everything about everything, but I think that Winter Park in particular has an amazing collection of citizens that really care about all of those issues you just mentioned. Not everybody's going to agree, but I think there's a passion about quality, density, movability. How do I get from, how do I make the experience of driving through Winter Park different than driving through, downtown Orlando. I mean, there's a different feel, there's a different experience. I think what's happened along Denny in particular, where they've slowed down the traffic and condensed all the traffic to 2 lanes, that affects me every day because I drive down that road. But that experience of driving down that road is so much different than it used to be. It's actually, I don't dread it. I don't mind having to sit at a light, an extra light, but I will say that the experience changed. So I think that all of those issues need to come into play. But I do think that people do want to live downtown. I think that is such a, it's not just Winter Park, it's everywhere, but we have this amazing jewel of a downtown. So, you know, there are people creating towns to mimic Winter Park. So they look at this as the model, like how can we get to this? So we have to protect it. That's our duty as Winter Park citizens, and make it beautiful, but yet deal with the growth in a responsible way.
Yeah, so listening to all this, one of the questions that I would have for the young people here is, you know, things I've wrestled with living in Winter Park here for 37 years, and I can't help but wonder how many of you can afford to live here once you get out of school. That's an issue that's got to be answered. I don't think we have a great answer for that, by the way. But I do think one of the things that we need to be looking at is going back to what the mayor said. First of all, there was a time when it wasn't that bad to have parking here, when we started letting people eat on the sidewalks, which I think has turned out to be a pretty good thing. We've become a destination because some people fought that. But so we become a destination. So we keep saying we like it through driving here. We don't want people driving through here. If we can bring them in on the train. And so maybe what we need to look at, and future architects, is how do you create an environment that it's clear that if you want to enjoy Winter Park, you can have outside, have a place where you can afford to live at a decent quality, and yet be able to easily get into town and walk, not drive. I think we worry about, well, there's too much traffic. That's because we're focusing on driving. Let's not drive. And so, to me, the element to address that is, as the mayor said, not enough people hear music. And I think maybe we ought to be focusing on how do we move people in and out for all the good things that we want the cities to remain. And you know, we're not going to stop development, that's true. But I think we need to look at it in that respect versus just the architecture, and although that's important, and then we can continue. That's just what I'm hearing here as I listen.
So I apologize, I have another event I have to run to this evening, but just to touch on that quickly, I think it's important too to realize where we stand in our region, and we're not going to get anything done without partnerships in this region. And you also have to understand what you can be and what you can't be. Phil mentioned Maine, and I've seen the pictures from your house. Never made the cut to get invited there. But the shoreline is beautiful, but we're never going to be Maine. We're never going to be that, right? So what can we do to kind of take advantage of that same beauty in a different way? And I think the same is to be said, as Ed was touching on, are there opportunities to create a much more fluid downtown? When I first got involved with the commission, people said, you've got to protect the downtown, protect the downtown, protect the downtown. You can't do anything, you can't touch Park Avenue. And I get that, I'm good with that. The problem is, that's really not defending Park Avenue. The way to defend Park Avenue too is to make Park Avenue larger. And so what we've worked consciously towards is making Hannibal Square a better experience. And with the canopy project down at 1792, what we're doing is we're expanding our core. And that makes us more unassailable. That is what is going to hold us together, is if we create more of Winter Park. Different flavor, 1792 isn't Park Avenue. Hannibal Square is not 1792 or Park Avenue. But yet I have people who love 1792 because they take their kids there, they think it's got a little bit funkier vibe than Park Avenue. It all feels like Winter Park to us, but yet it's a little bit of a different vibe, and we're expanding our core. So I want to thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to be here tonight, and thanks for the discussion. Thank you to the panelists. I do have to run, but I'll see you all soon. I'll see you.
I would like to thank all of our panelists. This is one of the reasons why we live in such an extraordinary community. We're also going to be inviting you back when Peg Cornwell breaks ground for our new architecture school. So,
Yeah, I was just going to add that her professors could be the architecture review. Everything Rollins approved.
I'd like to react to what Ed said. Ed, I agree with you. I think that we are not going to protect our community and our quality of life without addressing the access and the egress from the city of Winter Park. I happen to be living off of Aloma Avenue, and getting in and out of my neighborhood is a frightening experience. And it should not be that. And if we could persuade our commission to make a vigorous effort for the state to get hold again of 1792 and Fairbanks, those quarters, we might have an opportunity to do something to make a difference. I've got some ideas, but I think that is an ambitious thing, but I think it could be done. Because I know that it was on the agenda in the 90s, and it was removed, and for some reason went away. So I don't know why. But we have people commuting from our town, from Oviedo, every day, going to wherever they're going to work. And so maybe that could be addressed in some way. Maybe working regionally. I think the mayor made a good point. We have to work with other communities around here. But the traffic is serious.
I think the secret is to don't give up. You know, I remember the folks that live around the neighborhood, we live right near via Tuscany and Palmetto Road. And at one point, Charlie Clayton was going to build a assisted living facility right there, pretty much where via Tuscany ended. And the neighbors hated that idea because it's a residential area. It really changed it. It was a much more commercial area. And so we were able to obtain that little piece of property that's now the Hal Branch Preserve. But so I got hold of Troy Alloway, who's the Public Works Director, and he said, hey Troy, why don't you do something with that really ugly looking retention pond on Hal Branch Road? It's a real eyesore. And he said, well, we don't own it. And I said, well, who does own it? He said, Orange County owns it. I said, well, can we get it? He said, I tried and tried, but they just won't. They said, we can only have it if we take over all the maintenance for Hal Branch Road, and it would be $1 million a year. So it's just like, it's a non-starter. And I said, well, who you talk to? You're talking to like the top guy, or I was talking to kind of a middle guy. So well, maybe try the top guy. Sometimes the middle level people are kind of stonewalling. He came back about a year later. He said, "We got it." And he didn't give up. That's the trick. Maybe we were stonewalled about 1792 and Aloma, but if you keep at it, it's amazing what can happen.
yeah.
If I could, I'd just like to add a quick comment. For those who don't know, I am a civil engineer and do roadway design in the Department of Transportation. So, and I was in a political conversation the other day, and someone asked me, one good thing that Rick Scott has done. And well, one good thing he has done is he changed the viewpoint of the DOT to, we're not doing what we want, we're doing what the local officials want. And so something that's happened in this 6-year, 8-year period is that the things where the DOT used to say it's our road, we're doing what we want, is no longer the case. And I think that's really great because you're getting local governments and the state to work together and get things done. And I'll add, how many of you know that there is a study going on in 1792 right now? Okay, there's a contract that just got signed. Well, I don't think those be the commission meetings, because I can't tell you these things. But it is something that we've talked about at the commission meetings, and at some point there's going to be public involvement in that. So they're looking at doing beautification, land landscaping, other items. So when you talk about what can be done on Wilmington and Fairbanks, there's things they can look at, but we've got to get that going, and it takes the locals to say, hey, we want the DOT to do this, and the DOT is much more receptive, and then we can also share funding to make things happen that we want. And that used to not happen. That shared funding is something new also. So, but just as we go forward, a lot of things we talked about have to do with working together to get things done, and the opportunities are there.
And for our students, the obvious lessons are participate and persevere. So once again, thank you very much.